Welcome to Ingredients for Prevention, Recipes and Lessons from Virginia, hosted by me from the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. My name is Ilene Stohl, and I'm here with Jonathan Yglesias, and we'll get a chance to chat today. We're hoping to have this be more of a conversation. Of course, all of you are muted, so but Jonathan and I are hoping to have a conversation, and then we hope to have an active question and answer session throughout the webinar. So please do feel free, if anything comes up, to type a question in. We're hoping that it looks like all of you are very good at following directions and are listening through your mic and speakers. So, but if you have any trouble, feel free to send us a message. But it looks like all of you, oh no, some of you folks are on the phone, so that's fine too. But if you have a mic, actually, you don't need a mic. If you have speakers, that would be great. It's just better sound quality. So welcome, and this event is supported from funding from DSHS, which we always appreciate. But of course, the ideas are our own. So before we get started with some content, we're going to take care of some business, more like logistics and things like that. So bear with us. We're using a new webinar service, and so we're going to give very specific information about how to participate and stay in touch with us. So hopefully you all can hear me. Actually, why don't you do, well, we'll wait. I think I have a sign about raising hands, but hopefully you can all hear me. So I don't see any questions that says, why aren't you talking? So that's a good sign. So listen through your computer speakers and hear me, which means that you want to select the mic and speakers option. Otherwise, select that telephone option that's right above it, and then it'll give you the pin that you need. So hopefully that is clear and that you all are hearing us loud and clear. A little hot tip for you, sometimes we found that your control panel minimizes for some reason, just has a mind of its own, so you can always get it back if you click that orange button. So that can be a helpful thing if you can't find it and figure out what you're doing. And then we'd really like you to participate as much as possible. Everyone is on mute since we have quite a few participants, but we really are interested in hearing from you, so you can write a question in that box, and of course it doesn't have to be a question. It can actually be a comment. That's fine too, but you can see that box underneath here where you just clicked your mic and speakers. And then right below that is also a raise your hand button that for some reason, look at that circle. It's not in the right place. That's funny. I clearly need to move that red circle, but there's a raise your hand button. So why doesn't everybody try raising your hand? And that will let me know that you actually can hear me.
Oh, yeah.
You're all doing it. Good work, people. Okay. See, it's just gratifying for me. It makes me feel better. So you're all doing me a service. So okay, great. Now I think I can lower all your hands. Perfect. Okay, great. And then we have some help today. Erin, my colleague, also at WSCADV, is going to help me with the questions. So if you feel like I'm just going on and I don't see your question, it might be that Erin is helping me out, and she'll give me a little heads up. And then, of course, we're really interested in hearing from you about how this went for you, and we also want to know if you were on it. So fill out the eval form that pops up when the webinar ends, and please, when it asks who from your program attended this webinar, please let us know. And then one final thing, we are using interpreters on this webinar, and so we do that for all of us. And just know that sometimes we might be pausing if we're waiting to hear from the interpreter about a question or clarification, so we might have a little bit more time between things, and then we will try to pace ourselves as well to keep up with the interpretation. Okay, so who are these crazy people that are talking to you today? Well, this is a screenshot we took of ourselves as we were preparing. We were obviously a little overexcited, but this is how we feel about prevention. So this is Jonathan and I in my office. But we want to know who you are. So I'm going to attempt to do a poll. Let's see. Polls must be closed to enable. Okay, so you all are seeing a poll. So say who you are. We want to know. So we're giving everybody a chance to do this.
That might be it.
We're pretty close. Okay, so here's who you are. Congratulations. So it looks like we've got a lot of folks who identify as advocates, some who are just preventionists. When I say just, I mean solely. And the folks who are other, I'd be curious if you want to write in the question box what other either organizations you represent, or if you're just calling in as a public citizen. If you want to share in the question box, that would be great to know who you all are. And then we also have executive directors and management.
And 5% all the things all the time.
Right, which is probably everybody probably
Yeah.
can fit that, let's be honest. But we appreciate all that you're doing. So, and I'm actually really happy to see that there's quite a mix of folks, because I think that really building capacity takes all of us, and it's really nice to be able to have that partnership between management with executive directors and managers and advocates, so or preventionists and folks at the front lines. So again, if folks want to, oh look, child advocate, great. Anybody else who's an other wants to tell us? This poll only gave me 5 options, so you can put that in. But okay, well, feel free to tell us who you are. Okay, I'm just figuring this all out. All right, now you hopefully can see that. Okay, so this is what we're going to do today. We're going to talk a little bit about what we actually mean when we talk about prevention. We're going to talk about what prevention capacity is. Jonathan's going to share a lot about what they figured out in Virginia and what we can learn from that, and then we'll just continue on that path. And hopefully, I think it will build all of our capacity just by virtue of learning from Virginia. So what we talk about when we talk about prevention, I think, is a lot of different things. So I'm curious what you all think. So I would love it if you could write in the question box one word that describes ED prevention to you. And I know that's a really tall order, but I'm hoping that you can do that. So if you want to think about what's the one word, try and limit yourself to one word. I know that's hard, but one word.
And make it the first thing that comes to mind, good or bad. I'm very curious to know.
Yeah,
I think we both
absolutely.
are.
Yeah, don't censor. Okay, and then in the meantime, I'm going to mute us because I'm going to do something with this, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to look at these cute baby pictures while I do something. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself for a minute, so just stay tuned. Okay, we're back. But look what you all did. You created. So these were the words that we heard from folks. So this is a Wordle, and I'm just going to keep randomizing it so you can see. But what you'll see is that the words that are bigger are ones that people said more than others. So a lot of folks obviously said safety and education and hopeful and hope. These are all pretty positive,
Yeah.
Jonathan. I'm kind of surprised. Let's keep randomizing and see. Ooh, look at that one. Let's see what else we got. I love it. So if you're not familiar with this, this is from just Wordle.net, and all you got to do is put a bunch of text into the box, and you can get this yourself. So I encourage you to try it out.
I do like how this one was randomized, though, to say stop youth. Just so you know, those are two different words. They're not supposed to be together like that.
So here, let's do another one. Let's see. Look, and then you can also do one where you do your little layout, and you do mostly horizontal, so that way you can see this better. So seems like people feel pretty positive about prevention, so that makes things a little bit easier to build capacity, certainly. So we're going to put this back in the screen. Here we go. So thanks for taking the time to do that with us. This is what we were thinking of when we just were putting words in. So let's transition to what actually is prevention really. So I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan for a sec.
Okay. And everyone, I want to go ahead and introduce myself too. I didn't.
Oh yes, that's a good point.
I think I probably should have done that. I think we just skipped over that part. So my name is Jonathan Yglesias. I used to be with the Virginia Coalition working as part of the prevention team. Worked there for 3 years, and now my role is I'm working for the Washington State Department of Health doing rape prevention education, managing that funding source from CDC, and mostly working in sexual violence prevention. I'm also a consultant with the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence, but today I'm here really just sharing my experiences and the experiences that graciously the Virginia Coalition have allowed me to bring and kind of build on here. Just sharing my experiences in building capacity at local programs and at the Virginia Coalition around primary prevention. So with that, I think the Wordle that we created, I think that was overwhelmingly positive, and I think did a good job of summing up what at least Ilene and I would conceive of as prevention. And I think you guys are dead on, which is possibly why you're here, because maybe you otherwise wouldn't have signed up for a prevention webinar. I don't know. But so what we're talking about when we say prevention is the idea of stopping violence before it starts. So before there are any red flags, indicators, before we're witnessing it, stopping it before it can possibly occur. And part of that process is a long process of getting together with community members, with whoever it is that you define as your community, and improving a collective understanding of the underlying conditions in our society or in our community that perpetuate violence. So part of that also, you're going to see that the definitions for prevention kind of lead into one another. Part of that is also developing and enhancing our ability to change those conditions, with the hope that ultimately, if you create a buffer or change those conditions, you will eliminate violence. And one thing I also want to mention that isn't on the slide, but you'll often hear, is that in doing this work and kind of understanding what the underlying conditions are, we want to identify factors that we can promote to give people kind of an alternative message and say, say if we identify an underlying cause of violence as being racism or economic inequality or whatever, promoting factors that might counterbalance that in your community. So figuring out what those factors are and counterbalancing those, and focusing on healthy relationships, healthy sexuality, and counteracting the factors associated with initial perpetration. Also, I guess another thing to mention, you've heard me kind of talk a lot about community. The work of primary prevention by default really values the work of community and diverse communities, and having input from diverse stakeholders who can identify a whole swath of root causes for violence.
Great, well said, and thank you for introducing yourself. I apologize about that. Okay, great. So I love that those definitions, and then I also asked the question, no, really, what is prevention? So this is sort of what we've come up with at the Coalition, and you all will get a copy of this PowerPoint as well as a handout at the end that really goes into these more, so hopefully we can all get on the same page about what we feel like prevention really can look like, but when you're doing it. And so in our mind, prevention efforts seek to bring about change in that socio-ecological model, so individuals, relationships, communities, and society, through all these four strategies. So addressing root causes of violence, shifting culture and changing norms, building skills to have better relationships, and promoting healthy relationships. So like I said, we'll go into those more, but I'm hoping that you know, each time we say all of these things, it's narrowing and making it more and more real and tangible to folks.
So you guys are all here to talk about building capacity today. Another thing I want to mention is, and I think Ilene mentioned this earlier, but just a quick reminder, if at any point you have a question or want to raise your hand or be unmuted and actually have a conversation, like we said earlier, we want this to be a bit informal and just kind of, we want you to get what you need from this. So stop me at any point if you want clarification or just have a question. So what about building capacity? Another thing I want to mention is that a lot of this is, I mean, this is all stuff that we found in Virginia, and a lot of the process and a lot of what we knew to be true about building local program capacity in Virginia. Having said that, though, a lot of this knowledge is transferable, whether it be the violence prevention field in Washington State or business or any public health field that you can think of. So when we talk about this, my experiences are going to be about Virginia, but a lot of this I think is transferable. So first thing we want to do is define prevention capacity. And the way that we define that is the willingness and ability of staff members and agencies to engage in mission-driven efforts seeking to prevent DV perpetration in an effective manner. So this is the willingness of institutions, partners, and communities to basically see this work as their own. And that's, I mean, it sounds simple, but there are many, many factors that kind of contribute to how seamlessly that can take place and how sustainable that type of effort can be. So in addition to talking about kind of trying to break down what the factors are to actually achieving prevention capacity, we are also going to talk about, a little bit at least, about what sustainability of something like that might look like. So that pyramid that you all saw on, I guess, 2 slides ago, all of this is, these are ideas that were taken from the business world, actually. We don't have anything, or at least to my knowledge, that's been translated into violence prevention specific stuff. But that pyramid that we saw that kind of broke out how we would define organizational capacity was borrowed from an organization called Venture Philanthropy. I think Incorporated is what they're called. But they basically have very detailed a map, a blueprint of what organizational capacity should look like. And Ilene and I decided that we didn't like the pyramid, and we want more colors, and we want more emphasis on culture. So this is what we produced based on that pyramid, though. So when we break out elements of organizational capacity, what we're really going to be talking about are aspirations and strategies of the organization, organizational skills, and that's organizational wide, organizational structure and HR, and how all of those feed into whatever you want your culture to be and the influence that this has on organizational culture. And so our thought is that you end up with, if that's all done successfully, capacity. Yay.
Sounds good. Theoretically, that should change.
There we go. So let's define aspirations and strategy. When we're talking about aspirations and strategy, what we're talking about is the clarity and quality of an agency-wide prevention agenda and how they plan to realize it. That says a lot about a program's capacity, whether it be prevention, whether it be advocacy, whether it be trauma-informed care, any sort of issue that you could be looking at that's already incorporated into or to some degree acknowledged by an organization. How well they incorporate that idea into their overall strategic plans and just agency-wide strategies is going to be telling of how how successful that campaign or that component is. So we consider effective prevention programs to be a part of an agency's strategic plan, and an example of that could be, for example, because a lot of people think, okay, so say your strategic plan is broken out into 4 elements, or four different areas of the organization. So like maybe media and awareness, maybe services and service delivery system. You might have a section based on prevention, not sure. But say you have these different components that kind of devise your overall agency-wide strategic plan. Incorporating prevention into things that might not be, you might not necessarily always go to and just kind of intuitively think of. So for example, if you had that awareness and education piece of your agency strategic plan, maybe having a strategy associated with that that focuses on getting the community that you work with to identify prevention, or awareness campaign around getting your board members to disseminate the message of prevention to their connections. So things like that, kind of strategically weaving it into different parts of your agency-wide plan.
Yeah, and I think that probably a lot of you are already doing this or have done it in ways where you didn't even necessarily call it out as prevention, but when you go back and look, it really sets the stage nicely to do prevention. Mm-hmm. I know here at the Coalition, we actively engaged in a process to include prevention in our strategic plan for the first time, and that has really made then all of our future work on prevention much more solid, because we have this really solid footing sort of in the thing that's supposed to be the map, which, you know, sometimes it's hard to always go back and check the map, but it really is helpful when we're wondering, is this in line with what our members want us to do, and is this in line with what we've set out to do? It's helpful to have it.
Basically an agency-wide logic model.
Yeah.
As much as you guys love those, right?
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can make it pretty, right? No. We have, I realized we didn't do the prevention cheer. Do you know about the prevention cheer here?
No.
So we have a prevention cheer that I think has really, that is part of our aspirations and strategy, and we do it every time we ever meet. So it's a little bit, it's not going to be that great because it's just going to be me doing it, but I will share it with you because why not? I get any opportunity to share it. So whenever I'm at a staff meeting or at a board meeting or anything where I have to talk about the work that we're doing around preventing and stopping violence, we do a cheer, which I say prevention, and then people say prevention, but there's an arm movement that you can't see that kind of makes it. So.
It's a fist bump.
It is a fist bump, yeah. So hey, feel free to use that or make it your own. And we can all, if you all come to the conference, I'll do it with you.
Yeah, and definitely go to board meetings and do that.
Yeah, totally.
Or wherever you can.
Exactly. It's pretty great. You know, it's sweeping the nation, I will tell you.
So the next thing I want to briefly talk about is organizational skills. And I'm going to try and, I know that the capacity building with regards to, like, agency structure isn't the most exciting thing. So I'm going to try and get through this and get to Virginia's process a bit more. But organizational skills is the next thing. So I just want to define that as a staff's ability to, staff as an agency-wide staff, so collective abilities to conceive of, map out, execute, and regularly adjust the implementation of prevention initiatives. So this would also be, for example, how management and boards equitably prioritize prevention as compared to advocacy and kind of service delivery agendas. Also, the extent to which staff are using prevention-specific promising practices to inform initiatives. So what types of tools and what types of theories and what types of background are being incorporated into the overall ability and organizational skills of the staff. And also, I define this as demonstration of willingness and readiness and ability to engage in prevention. In my experience in Virginia, the agencies that were able to kind of execute this well in terms of kind of cross-sectional capacity building for prevention in terms of organizational skills had a director or middle management or kind of someone there that was supporting the prevention advocate or supporting the people who are kind of out in the community doing the work to cross-train their fellow advocates and go to a board meeting and present on what it is that the prevention program consists of, that type of thing. That's where I saw it being most successful in Virginia. and I'm guessing that could be true of Washington as well.
And I think this one I feel like really can be a process where people grow into these skills. I mean, it's not one of those things that we just expect people will come out of the gates having. Like, this is definitely something that you have to learn, try out, and kind of readjust. So I think it's really exciting because it's one of those, one of the things I think that's great about being an advocate or working in this field is that you're always able to grow and change your mind about things and change. So this is one of those things that you can really start developing these skills and improving on.
All right, so next is organizational structure and HR. This is what we're defining as the ability of program managers to understand the knowledge and skill sets necessary for prevention positions and are able to accurately represent that understanding in recruitment. So kind of a thing that I heard a lot, at least in Virginia, was, we had plenty of really capable, brilliant people, I think, doing the work in communities. But one of the things you always heard was I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I think that's true of both prevention and advocacy because, I mean, what were there? Like 5% of you answered you do all the things all the time at your agency. So that's pretty true of just being at any agency, I think. But part of that is also telling to how the recruitment and kind of HR structure is in terms of just having people understand what the job is that they're applying for and what they're going to be expected to do. Because a lot of times I think it's pretty common to just say, go do this thing called prevention and, here are some resources for you to call on, but you're kind of on your own. Mm-hmm. So kind of reworking and understanding how the organizational structure and HR can support an understanding of new hires and the ability of someone to succeed in that type of position. And another thing that calls for is possibly, I mean, it depends on the organization, but adapting supervision habits. So, with advocates, well, this isn't totally true of advocates, but I was going to say for most service delivery-oriented advocates, they're in the office a lot. I mean, you see them a lot. And for prevention folks, it might be more of volunteering at a soup kitchen to make connections with the community that you want to work with. So it might just be kind of acknowledging that your supervision habits have to change and that you need to make room for people who are going to be doing different types of work. So just something to acknowledge.
Yeah, and I think as we move more towards mobile advocacy and things, that programs are already adjusting that sort of thing anyway. So it's really nice to think about, how do you also make, your supervision limitless in that way so that you don't have to have, just like we don't want our services to be contingent upon you living in shelter anymore. We want them to be available to lots of folks. We also want our supervision to be able to be beneficial to those folks who are out in schools or out in communities in a different way. So again, this is something that doesn't happen overnight. But I think it's really nice to have it outlined of this is something to work towards. And I think that a lot of times, I think in the field so far, we've really filled this gap by having more networks that are outside of your organization to support you, which we're going to talk a lot about what those are. But it can be, you really see a difference when folks who are doing prevention are also actively supported and able to kind of brainstorm and connect with the people that are, in the same organization as them. And I think it does improve your victim services in the end also if you're all connected.
Yep.
Because, prevention work is so closely tied to that. So, and we'll talk more specifically about that as well. But it's nice to think about moving towards this for sure. Yeah.
Yep. Definitely. So the last thing is our big culture piece, which leads to capacity, yay. So when we refer to culture, what we're talking about is what type of organization and whether the program and its affiliated individuals view themselves as service delivery organizations or social change organizations or maybe something else entirely. Basically what we're talking about here is how the process of how many agencies have evolved from a service delivery system, emphasizing services to victims, and kind of what things would possibly need to change in order to incorporate prevention fully into things that we were talking about, like strategic plans and organizational structure and HR. But if the culture devalues in any way prevention or the idea of ending violence before it occurs, then building capacity could potentially be slow. If it at all devalues a separate line of work that's not fully service delivery oriented, then there's something out of sync, right? And kind of like what Ilene was saying, these two things very much need to be in sync. And a lot of times, I mean, even when we're talking about like fundraising or awareness in media, the connections that you can make through prevention in your community can oftentimes garner more funding for services and garner more awareness for the services that do exist and vice versa. Anything you want to add, Ilene?
I don't think so. I mean, yeah, I think that it's such a huge part of how we do our work is how our organization is and functions and feels like. And certainly we want, just like we want healthy relationships for all, we want healthy organizations for everybody to work in. So I think if we can increase the ability of organizations to really support this work, I think it will only lead to better things. Before we move on, I did want to say that I got a question about can you define what is meant by mobile advocacy? And so, you know, it's so easy to just slip right into jargon. You know, I don't want to, but it happens. So mobile advocacy is a term that we often use when we are talking about our domestic violence housing first program work, which is really focused on getting folks access to permanent housing and then meeting their advocacy needs. And we really see that as a way of it actually I think is prevention in a lot of ways, but it's really, we've seen it really work for folks, for survivors who have a lot going on, and sometimes, you know, coming to support group is not the thing that's actually going to make a difference. Getting safe and stable housing is, and then that really enables them to move forward. So mobile advocacy has really come out of that movement, which is meeting people where they're at, literally and figuratively. So meeting them out in the community, maybe at a coffee shop or, you know, at the laundromat or wherever it is that they need to be. So that's sort of our shorthand for just thinking about different ways than having somebody have to come into our bricks and mortar shelter or bricks and mortar community advocacy program. So hopefully that helps you get a sense of what we meant by that. Okay, so this was a nice time for us we were just curious. So now that we've kind of talked about all of these things and culture sort of leads into this, we're wondering, you know, this is always a test that people give. So we don't want you to feel like it's a test, but we're wondering, what does your mission statement say anyway? So if you could write in the question box, hopefully you know it. I'm sure you've memorized it off the top of your head. What is your mission statement? Because we're just curious, is it already written for you in terms of how you make a lot of these justifications, or is it some work that you might need to do? So in the question box, tell us what your mission statement is.
Good on time. Okay.
Okay, so somebody's saying nothing about prevention or education. Somebody else is saying providing safety, education, and empowerment to the victims of violence and to the community. Interesting. Empowering women, eliminating racism. That's the why. Treat with compassion. Interesting. Dedicated to ending domestic abuse by providing a wide range, oops, I just lost it. A wide range of services for victims and by facilitating social change. We oppose the use of violence as a means to control another person and encourage individuals to acknowledge and reclaim their personal power. We will be changing this. Interesting. Ending sexual and domestic violence through personal and societal change. So that's very explicitly prevention. ATVP promotes peace, equality, and justice for all. So I would say it's about half and half. Would you agree that like some of them are explicitly saying, you know, prevention messages, and then some of them are more implicit, and then some of them not so much. Somebody else just said a community voice powerfully advocating for the health and well-being of all people.
That's prevention.
That is totally prevention. You all could be doing deliver social, human, and health services, and then Pamela's saying that there's more too. So, I mean, I think a lot of you have some really solid ground already to stand on. When we did a very informal poll of missions about 5 years ago and found that almost 80% of our member programs had mission statements that either explicitly or implicitly implied prevention. So that was actually very surprising to me, but in some ways, but then in other ways it totally wasn't, because I think most of us do get into this work because we want it to end. We don't want people to experience this. So, but I think also a lot of us come to this work and we're really just doing the day in and day out crisis intervention and support. And I think that over time that's changed quite a bit of what people envision their work is. But I just think it's a helpful thing to look. I just got another one. Let's see. To advocate with compassion for victims of domestic and sexual abuse, educate the public about such forms of abuse, develop programs to prevent abuse in the future, and to provide leadership in the community on issues of concern to women, men, and children. Wow, that definitely is prevention and quite a mouthful.
Yep.
I don't know if that works for the elevator, but I like it. And then Connections is committed to elimination homeless and domestic and sexual violence in the homes, relationships, and communities. So definitely.
I mean, kind of the theme, it seems, is eliminating and ending. Those two words seem to be present in many people's mission statements, which is, I mean, by default, very prevention and very much a way for you to kind of make strategic connections outside of services as well.
Yeah. Great. Well, thanks for doing that. That's really interesting. We'll also forward those on so you can see them instead of me just reading them out loud. But great. You all have great foundations to start from for sure. Okay, so this is my tagline. I couldn't resist, but I've been to Virginia a lot, and whenever I drive in, it always says Virginia is for lovers. So I just thought it was very fitting. So I'm going to...
Which is arguable. It is still in the South.
Presentation, right.
But yeah, but no, I would argue that Virginia is for lovers. So, like I said, part of this conversation is going to be dedicated to just kind of what I learned in Virginia being at the coalition, and kind of the process of how we identified that local programs and local prevention folks didn't feel comfortable with the brand of prevention, and how we wanted to rebrand that, and in what types of tools and products came out of that process that kind of allowed for us to have common language and a common understanding to operate from. So yeah, with that, I'm just going to dive into what we learned in Virginia.
This is the first one.
Yep. So what we did, let me kind of give you an idea of what the Virginia landscape is with regards to prevention, was and still is to some degree. So we have, just like Washington, rape prevention education funded programs. We had Delta, which was a CDC funding stream specifically designed to build the capacity of local DV programs and shelters to provide intimate partner violence prevention in communities, and that was a pretty intensive project. And then we also had folks who were supporting and leveraging funds from their communities, from foundations, and from private organizations, or just their general fund to support prevention on the ground in their organization. So we had quite a range of what types of prevention were occurring, to what degree they were feeding into the coalition's kind of groundwork and framework for doing it, and really kind of a large degree of different types of funding sources and different levels of funding. So what we did, and what the Action Alliance has been doing for years, has been putting out a membership survey that's kind of just, I mean, foremost how are we doing our job, and what types of training and TA do you think you need in the future? What types of policy initiatives should we focus on? And so I think it was 2009, possibly 2010, decided to put in a few prevention questions and kind of just get a baseline around what people's understanding of prevention was in the state. So the thing that came out of that was, and I think everyone was surprised, was that there's a huge image problem. The brand of prevention was overwhelmingly people. There was both. It was both multiple choice, but then there was also an option to write in answers. And overwhelmingly in the write-in section, we saw confusing and impossible. That rose to the top pretty immediately. So yeah, so this is kind of how we decided to deal with that. So in terms of prevention is confusing, when we got those results from the membership survey, we decided to follow up, do a few key informant interviews, and just kind of talk to people, folks on the board that were part of local agencies. And what we really got from confusing when we followed up was that prevention seemed to be just public health and concepts that were seemingly not in congruence with advocacy and what these organizations had been doing for so long. So it was very jargon-focused, very kind of conceptual and not grounded, and again, seemingly very different from service delivery, which was the predominant landscape in Virginia. It also came up, as I said, as impossible. And by that, what people mostly said was that it was too abstract and too idealistic, and that it's too much to think that one organization can solve the world's problems. Preventing perpetration was just too daunting an issue. And again, kind of feeding into that whole jargony, confusing idea that rose to the top in our membership survey. I mean, it was just, we weren't giving people a common language to understand this from, to have it feel a bit more grounded and a bit more concrete for folks. So with that, we kind of recognized that prevention was the baby that no one wanted to hold.
So sad.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Good friend of mine described it as that, and that really stuck with me. And I've been kind of using that as just how I sadly describe prevention every now and then. I'm glad that none of you put that in the Wordle in your description of what prevention is. But I mean, ultimately, that's what it felt like to some folks, especially in Virginia. So we wanted to change that. So this is real quickly. What we did to change that was we went through a formal social marketing process to arrive at a very kind of cohesive campaign for remessaging and rebranding with a set of ideas around products and tools that we could disseminate to the field in an effort to get that message out, in order to get the brand out, in order to get people feeling like they had something to work from. So we actually did work with a designer and someone who has a background in social marketing expertise, and went through this entire process. We talked about who our audience was, what the general message of our prevention work was. So getting together, I mean, it really was just a room of us getting together with input from local programs and saying, what do you want prevention to be? Like, what makes sense to you? And then coming up with goals, objectives, and really identifying what the current perception was versus a counter story, what we wanted it to become. And part of that was also identifying benefits and adjectives. And this is a process that I think even informally can be useful to any local program who feels like some of these ideas just aren't sticking with their community or with their board or with other folks in the organization. So what we found was that, again, the current brand wasn't working. The perception was that prevention was hard. People didn't understand it. There were not enough resources, or they're too broadly spread, too thin, that it actually took away from what programs are supposed to be doing. So again, kind of this duality, this tension between service delivery and what would be prevention, or the ending violence in most of your mission statements. It was too amorphous, not concrete, not grounded, hard to measure, too liberal. I mean, again, this was Virginia, so too liberal, takes too long. Again, kind of looking at, if we're talking about the organizational capacity factors that we talked about earlier, kind of the idea that people have to be out of the office and have to be like really cultivating a process that is quite lengthy and doesn't always go the way that you want to. You don't have full control over it. So it takes too long for sure, not achievable, so why even bother? So that was the daunting part, the it's impossible part. So when we got in a room and kind of sat down and talked about what we wanted the counter story to be, this is what we came up with. You're already doing it. It's not harder than what you're currently doing. It's hopeful, which is, I loved that that was one of the big words in the Wordle. Most of you already agree with that. You can plan for and think about what is possible, not just in terms of how empowering and really significant it is to envision your community without violence, but also in terms of kind of business practicality. If the work that you're doing can also extend into, you know, healthy sexuality or youth development or any number of other fields, then you have that much more of a likelihood to build on partnerships and to possibly increase other sources of funding or to increase partnerships that would leverage your common agenda. So that was something we definitely wanted to push. Training and tools are available. We really wanted to make sure that the coalition was being used and that we put out products and tools and things that helped people build on their understanding of prevention and succeed at doing it in their communities. And we also wanted this to feel like social change work. We wanted people to feel like this was very important and that even if it doesn't feel like they're doing anything huge, it is systemic and there is a ripple effect. So here are the benefits that we came up with. It's not crisis mode, not reactionary, because it's a lot of envisioning, a lot of planning, a lot of really becoming someone who is aware of the community players. It is about substantial change, proactive, tools that improve intervention responsiveness to community, more working in the community, which as a result would likely mean that you have a better understanding of who your community is and how to operate within it, which ultimately, just like Eileen was saying earlier, supports the types of like service awareness and the types of support that you can find for services in your community. And it is visioning. It's really trying to understand and vision what your community looks like without violence.
So when Jonathan and I were talking about this and he was sharing that with me, I just was like, wow, this sounds so familiar. And this is that those really were in line with those 3 pivots that we've been talking about quite a bit. And so for folks who haven't heard of these are from the Move to End Violence. And we're incorporating them quite a bit in the last 2 annual conferences that we've had and in the Just Futures work. But it just really resonated with me that this pivot, especially around being proactive, that I've heard a lot of folks just really appreciate thinking about how to move from reactive to proactive, and that prevention is one of those ways to do that in a really concrete way. So that really resonated with me. And then this piece around moving from silos to being more interconnected, certainly within our own agencies, but also within our community. We have lots of like-minded and people who want people to have really happy, healthy, whole lives that are in our communities that maybe aren't focused on relationships, but they're focused on things that if we partnered with them, it would really just increase the benefits of our work. So that I thought was really great, and it really came out in those benefits that Jonathan was talking about. And then finally, moving from that primary focus on service delivery to really being about social change, which again, if we think about those mission statements that you have, so many folks' mission statements are really focused on social change and social transformation, that this is a way of thinking about how do you actually get your program to be in line with that. And again, this isn't going to happen overnight, but it's just nice to have it. There's like a map now, which who knew that we were actually on the map? You all are doing this anyway, and we were supposed to be doing it. So so that for me was really gratifying to see that we're actually like in line with these 3 things that we've been talking about. We'll do a little plug for our conference at the end, but we're going to continue weaving this thread at our conference in September again, and then certainly with that Just Futures work that Tira is heading up.
So we kind of devised, again, this is all a brainstorming process facilitated by the person who is heading up our kind of social marketing rebranding process. So we came up with adjectives that we wanted people to feel when they hear the word prevention, when they think about prevention. And this is what we wanted. We wanted people to first feel good. So the adjectives we came up with were active, sexy, positive, cool, innovative, energizing. We also wanted people to feel possible, to feel like they truly can be agents of change, and that they can infuse social change, and like Ilene was saying, the transformation to prevention throughout, they can kind of weave that into their agency. So we wanted this to feel realistic, achievable, relevant, energizing, hopeful. And the third thing was feel part of it, kind of that interconnectedness with community, but also having a larger partnership with the coalition and with other people on the ground doing prevention in communities around the state. So kind of this utopian, hopeful feeling again. And Ilene added to this slide the little hyperbole and a half image, which I totally love and I think should be incorporated into everyone's training ever. If you guys don't know hyperbole and a half, you gotta go check it out. It's great. But yeah, so this is what we wanted people to feel, this little cartoon with the broom. We wanted them to be like, yeah, prevention.
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, what I've noticed is, like, this is what I see actually in Washington State, that people are feeling this. You know, certainly not by my design. You know, it's just people, I think, get that being able to do this prevention work is such, like, a joyous gift, you know, to really think about what is the other side of it. That so many of us who have done advocacy and have sat with survivors for so long really have just embraced this idea of, like, wow, it'd be pretty great if we were working with folks to have really happy and lovely relationships as opposed to ones that are based on power and control. So this, I think, is happening in this state, which is really exciting. And that's really just a testament to all of you who are out there doing such great work. So in some ways, I feel like you know, we're starting in the middle instead of at the beginning, which is kind of nice. So we're lucky about that.
Yeah. So this is what we came up with. In going through that process, we came up with this brand, yes, changing the future with fresh ideas and effective tools. And we wanted to brand this under the guise of something that everybody feels good about and comfortable with, or hopefully, food and baking and a process, you know. Just the idea that, like, if you want to become the next Julia Child and really make a souffle, it's not going to happen overnight. But when you finally see the change happening, it is going to feel so gratifying, and it's going to look great, and it's going to taste great, and it's going to be all things great. So this is what we came up with.
I loved the recipe metaphor. It totally worked for me.
So with that, these were just a few things in Virginia that we decided would help us kind of disseminate that brand and that message. We had a newsletter that we were kind of branding with this tagline, yes, changing the future with fresh ideas and effective tools. The annual report had the same colors and kind of theme. We devised a prevention website, a microsite basically, for local prevention programs to kind of upload their information and project share, but also kind of under this new brand. It was a way for them to give if they wanted to go out in the community and talk to funders or potential partners, say, look, go to this site and kind of see how everyone in prevention in Virginia in particular is interconnected. And one of the big things that we came out with was a recipe for prevention, this card. Basically a recipe card that broke down what we experienced or what we thought to be the true elements of understanding prevention. And to kind of promote that, had a recipe per month that we're going out to membership. We had an e-group similar to how Washington does, multiple e-groups and kind of places for people to connect. And there was technical assistance and training, which the coalition here does. So this is the recipe for prevention, the card that we were talking about. And this is arguably, at least in my opinion, the most significant tool that was produced from this campaign, and was kind of a way to give people something that they could take both to their organization, but to, like, legislators in their community, in their city or in their county, whoever, or go to, if they're going to a meeting that's a kind of stakeholder group that they're a part of, something that they could just hand off and say, here's something so that you kind of understand my work, and let's talk about the ways that we can kind of overlap and get involved with one another.
I'm sorry, just to interject, we are going to send out a PDF of this, so if it's, I know it might be a little small to see, don't sweat it. It's also available online, but we'll send out a PDF copy of it.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to this and explain it, but real quick, I want to talk about, just lay out for you who the audience was for this. So again, it was internal. We wanted people in the field. Our Virginian domestic violence and sexual assault agencies, I mean, it was to build their capacity and a common language for these organizations to talk amongst one another. It was for other community organizations that could potentially be partners or that these DV and SA agencies were coming into contact with. It was for state partners beyond the coalition and beyond the coalition's reach. It was also for these people's staff and boards. And then again, it was for general public, for the legislators in the community, for people who already have some knowledge of what's happening, maybe by virtue of being a part of some sort of a stakeholder group or just sharing space with the people who are doing this work. Can we go back to the recipe? So real quick, I want to go through kind of what we devised, the ingredients, more or less, of prevention. It should also be said that this was based on a document that came out 2 years prior to this. It was the Virginia's guidelines for the primary prevention of sexual and intimate partner violence. Based on, and I'm sure for those of you who do prevention at your organization, kind of based on Maury Nation's work around what it takes cross-sectionally in public health to have effective, long-lasting prevention programming to make the message sticky. So what we did was we took all the jargon and all the confusing stuff that was in our guidelines, in all this research, and in public health, and tried to make it something that was digestible for folks. So the first thing, 2 cups of energy. Find a team of cooks and a kitchen equipped with tools to build capacity in your program to implement effective prevention strategies. So basically the idea that you can't do this alone, that you need support at your agency, that it is highly suggestible to look to the coalition or the coalitions for training, for TA, for resources, for leverage, for ideas, just somebody to bounce ideas off of. And that a lot of that requires energy. A lot of that requires staying focused and really kind of having a vision and a plan for that vision. The second thing that we wanted to incorporate was that this takes a lot of innovation. That this is a process that while we have public health blueprints and concepts like the social ecology, like the spectrum of prevention, like all these things that public health churns out for us, those are just blueprints. Those are maps. And so a lot of this takes somebody who's willing to engage in an innovative process with whoever they define as their community or whoever they define as their stakeholders for a particular prevention project. So it could really be something as simple as sitting down and kind of what Ilene was talking about earlier with looking at what are the root causes as they exist in this community, and let's come up with really innovative ideas to counteract those things and to create buffers so that people don't feel like they're going to fall into the river, more or less.
We went almost an hour without having a river metaphor. Good work.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah, sorry to lay the river metaphor out there. Just pops up.
That's totally okay.
So the next thing was half a cup of promotion. One of the things that we really wanted to emphasize is that for years and years and years, and again, this is in the research and this is kind of what we know of effective public health principles, is that it's no longer effective to say don't abuse your partner, don't rape, don't be addicted to substances, whatever the public health issue is, saying don't doesn't really work. And there needs to be a process of giving people an alternative vision. And so we had a number of kind of tools and ideas and things to allow people to kind of envision what the alternative would be and how to relay that effectively to their community. Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I've always wished that promotion it just sounded better, because I love the idea of calling our prevention work promotion, but it just doesn't sound as good. So we haven't made the transition, but I think for me, this is the piece that is really exciting, and I guess it goes with the innovation piece too, that we're really good at telling people what's bad about abusive relationships. I mean, we have it dialed in. We totally understand that and have a great we have lots of research, we have lots of experience, but what really I think sticks with people, I love that idea of saying sticky, what sticks with people is that thing of like, okay, so you don't want me to do this, what should I do? And so I think that is the innovative part, that we can really do some incredible work. And I'm going to talk about one of the resources that we're trying to develop here at the Coalition that hopefully will help you do that. But there's lots of great stuff that's, I think, starting to do that. So I love the idea of promotion. I just wish we had a better word for it.
Yeah. Well, I always liked, so it's still promotion, but I always liked promoting the positive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I like alliteration.
I like alliteration, too. It works for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It felt good. But, yeah, and kind of to piggyback off of what Ilene just said, Virginia also, while I was at the Coalition, we went through a very extensive process of facilitating these focus groups with teens ages 14 to 16 all over the state, little groups of teens, like 8 to 10 of them at a time, and kind of got a lot of information around, we wanted to know what they thought of healthy relationships, what the components of those were, and what we were getting from them were a lot of ideas around how developmental assets and what types of structures and supports could be in place in their community to help them thrive in the way that we want to see teens thrive. And one of the predominant findings that came out of all those focus groups, I mean, we did so many of them, but one of the things that came out of that was all of these teens were like, we know what makes a bad relationship. Like, if you give us the components of a healthy relationship and a terrible relationship, we can call those out and we can make you the longest list that you would ever want to see. It doesn't matter. Like, we can do that. But part of the issue was they didn't think that they deserved that, and they didn't expect to have that.
Right. And they didn't see it around them.
Yeah. And their reality wasn't mirroring that. So yeah, I mean, while it is definitely, like, I still believe in teaching people about red flags and indicators of violence and, like, bystander intervention and speaking up, kind of focusing more on the positive and that alternative vision that Ilene was talking about is really, it's something that I think we all need, teens or adults, no matter who.
And I think it's also, I mean, it's less controversial and scary to talk about. I mean, in some ways, it's easier to get into places to talk about that, and it might open more doors. Because if really we're talking about the vision that we want for folks, it's, we share that vision with a lot of people who are not doing our work. So it actually opens doors. So I see that being the future of our work.
Yep. So the other thing, well, let me go down the list here. Where was I? So, one heaping teaspoon of being realistic.
What?
Yeah. So again, this is that souffle situation. If you're, I don't know how many of you are bakers out there, but I could not make a souffle the first time perfectly, and I'm sure that is just an impossible thing. You prove me wrong. But this is the idea that that starting small and starting within your means and building and allowing kind of the community to define where you go and how you expand is a part of the process and is something that's important. So really being grounded, and even though we're talking about all this visionary work and social change and ripple effect and blah, 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 being realistic and understanding what your parameters are and in what ways you can affect change immediately and in what ways you might need to build towards that or strive for it was very important, and we wanted to emphasize that.
We're going to talk about tools a little bit later, but I feel like this is a perfect time to say, in their shoes is the perfect box cake, right, instead of a souffle. That is something that you all know how to do, and it really starts that conversation that gets you ready for prevention. So, doing that in and of itself is not the thing that you want to do for all your prevention efforts, but it is the thing that might help you figure out where does your community want to go and what are the things that are worrying them, what are the things that they're really excited about. So that, I feel like, could be your box cake, and it happens to be in a cute little box too, so you got that going for you.
So 2 cups of practice, this was a very important one to us. And this is kind of continually what we hear more and more from the field and from federal funders as well, is that evaluation is important. And in recognizing that evaluation is important, we also wanted to recognize that you don't get it right on the first time, and that it takes multiple tries and kind of stick-to-itiveness to evaluate strategies effectively, and a willingness to kind of continue to change and tweak your programming and maybe build on it and expand, or just totally try something new. But this idea that you got to keep trying, and as you go, continually evaluate what you're doing and build on basically whatever you find to be an effective lead. If you're seeing change with a curriculum and a media campaign that you're doing, go with that and see, like, do focus groups and figure out, like, to what extent could this change to be more effective. And if it turns out to not be effective at the end, then figure out how you can continue to change that. Just stick-to-itiveness, really, and evaluation.
I like that word, stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah.
That's good.
Last one in the ingredients section is 3 cups of commitment. So this was the idea that it is possible to do this work and that it doesn't happen overnight. So it just kind of the reinforcing principle of keep trying all these things and keep doing all these things and keep investing in all these things and keep calling on your partners to reinforce what it is that you're doing and to kind of re-energize people around what you believe you can do. And so what we did on the second half of this recipe card was basically just give people the cookbooks that they needed. So our guidelines for the primary prevention of sexual violence and intimate partner violence, gave them the idea to attend as many trainings and classes, what we called cooking classes, as possible, and tried to make those as successful as possible. And also the idea that the coalition is there for support, that if you need to be a sous chef for a minute, then we are more than happy to help. Also, we wanted people to swap recipes. We wanted people to program share, and we wanted there to be kind of this, whether it be formal or informal, some sort of community of practice where people who are finding good results or are finding that something is really catching on in their community, that they're not doing that in isolation, that those success stories are being shared across the state. So with that, I'm not going to go over this, but with that, we gave folks, keeping in mind that the audience was both internal, both the organization and boards and those types of things, but also any potential community partners and any potential policymakers or anything like that. We wanted to give people, instead of this super simple, stripped down recipe card, something to support their argument or to support their discussion. So this was a set of primary prevention talking points that could help you devise a briefing or help you pull content for talking about the recipe card to your board or whoever.
So I think we've kind of connected all of these to what you can do in Washington, but the things that really stuck with me were this idea of getting your board on board. So really have conversations with them, or you or somebody else in your organization, that really affirms that you all are interested in preventing domestic violence and that you're going to put resources to do that. That might take time in terms of what it actually looks like, but I think just starting with that conversation is a really helpful place to be. The other thing is start talking about the fact that domestic violence is preventable, and sometimes that is sort of a revelation to people, that this is actually not something that has to occur. It's not something that just, you wake up and of course it's going to happen. No, people learn this. There are lots of reasons that we can actually address to prevent domestic violence. So start spreading that message, and we'll have a couple of slides after this. We'll have some messages that you can use and kind of spread the good word. Stay connected. This is something that we really hope that you continue to talk with us here at the Coalition and with each other. There's lots of listservs that you can get on, and email lists, and just a way of really learning from each other. We do this work better when we're together, and there's no reason for all of us to be recreating the wheel. When honestly, we don't even know what the wheel is yet, right? We're just sort of all on the road together. So I think if we're learning that one thing works better than the other, let's share it with each other and figure it out. And that goes to really the fourth point around trying it out. Try it out, try again, evaluate it, learn from it, start trying again. That really just getting out there and trying something is the best thing that you can do, because you'll figure out what works about it and what doesn't. And if it doesn't work, then great, don't do that again. No sense in really worrying about it. Just move on and figure out what was the thing that didn't work, and is there something that you can do better. And then finally, making that connection for folks, like we talked about earlier, of what why is a victim service organization or somebody who's focused on helping people in domestic violence relationships, why are we doing prevention work? Making that connection for folks that actually our victim services improve if we do better prevention. Because if we can start figuring out, number one, why folks are abusing people, then we can help support those victims better, and we can also make their lives better in the future, that they won't have to have more abusive relationships, their kids will be in healthier relationships, and that is better for all of us. Really making that connection that beloved community is for all of us. You know, you don't have to be living in utopia to get that beloved community. Somebody's asking, any tips for how to evaluate if something works or not in the context of prevention?
Tips for how to evaluate? Well, I would say it really depends on what strategy you're looking at, because it could be, I'm guessing, well, it could be a number of qualitative or quantitative things. We have all sorts of scales that come out of public health that kind of say if you're looking at someone's like behavioral intent or something like that with regards to perpetration. There are plenty of scales out there that really get at what it might be that you want to evaluate around behavioral intent in particular. There are plenty of ideas around how to conduct an appropriate focus group or key informant interviews. There are all sorts of tools out there at our disposal that public health gives us, and it's really figuring out what combination of things feel like they fit in line with your strategies and what it is that you're hoping to accomplish. So I don't know. I guess just know that there's a lot out there, and that there are lots of people at the coalition willing to help around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really tricky question, because there is a lot that folks are doing, I think, that is either very resource intensive, right? And then there's like a whole scale, right? And so I think it depends on what resources you have at your disposal. But, you know, people are doing the behavioral checklist, I think, is one thing that people are doing quite a bit of that's less resource intensive. And then, of course, they're doing longitudinal studies. So I think that's something that we at the coalition could do more work on, to figure out, like, what are the things that are actually working for people in terms of really knowing. There's this idea of not doing necessarily evidence-based practice, but doing practice-based evidence, which I think is kind of where we're at right now in prevention, is, you know, really people going out and doing, and then figuring out, after having done that, you know, what was the thing that worked, at least from their perspective at their community, and then really trying to make that then have evidence. But it's I feel like it's a little bit tricky.
One thing I will say is one of the most effective evaluation tools that I ever saw, just for like a, you know, post like youth session. It was for teens in high school, in an alternative high school, and it was this simple questionnaire at the end of each session that was, I think it was 3 questions, and the first one was this target that had 3 layers, and the 3 layers said, so on the outer rung it said like totally bored. On the like middle rung it said this was okay, and on the like middle, the bullseye, it said this was awesome, or something like that. And so after each session, the kids got to answer that, and then they could like expand on that in the other 2 questions and say why they were bored, or like how to change it. And just in terms of what I saw the facilitators feel more comfortable with, was when they took those sessions to other schools, and when they had a new set of students in coming years, they really kept all of those program evaluations on file to just tweak and redesign what they were doing. And the evaluations got better and better. So something even as simple as evaluation, if it's a session with youth or anything like that. Because originally my mind just went directly to like key informant interviews and scales and blah, blah, blah. But continuous quality improvement of the programming that you're already doing can just be something as simple as 2 questions.
Yeah, and hopefully we're familiar with doing that too with our with survivors that are in our programs. So, you know, what are the 2 questions that we want to ask folks around our prevention stuff? And the thing is that if we're not, you know, it's an interesting question to ask, you know, was it awesome? Was it boring? Because it doesn't necessarily mean behavior change, but if we're not actually engaging with people, then of course there's not going to be behavior change. So I think for youth it is really something of like, you want to know, are they hanging with you? Are they staying with it? Are they, saying to their friends, hey, that wasn't so bad, or that was so cool, or oh, I'm sorry you have to sit through that. But that actually does make a difference. So here is our messaging that we have to help you, and a lot of you have probably seen this, but I think that this is the thing that we can really use that, again, sort of starts to shift that culture and really create conditions that people think that it is possible to have healthy relationships, and not just, oh, I know what that is, but I'll never achieve it. So I think we should shout from the rooftops that domestic violence is preventable, or it's not inevitable. This violence can definitely be stopped. We all have a role to play. I think that's just, if you get one thing out of this, I think that's the thing that we should just be telling everyone we know. That it is preventable. And in terms of, if you're talking to folks who maybe are funders in your community or donors, it's helpful to say like how you're going to stop it. So we can stop this violence before it starts by promoting healthy relationships, shifting culture, building skills, and addressing root causes of violence. I'll again go into that in just a sec of what like some examples of that is. It's also, sometimes people like the money angle, that not only is prevention better for all people, it also saves money. There's all sorts of studies. For folks that have our fresh sheets from Kelly, our PR, our media and communications person, there's actually some statistics that we have that that show that. So if you're not on that list and you're interested in getting those statistics, let me know. And then, it's also nice to say, that we still, of course, want to support funding for services for victims, and we really also want to hold abusers accountable. So. But I think our statewide message really is just this idea that domestic violence is preventable and that we all have a role to play in stopping the violence before it starts. And then you can tailor that to your own, but I think it has been, we've seen it certainly in newspaper coverage, that it is helpful to have this cohesive statewide message.
So this was just this was actually a question that we were asked in Virginia when we were kind of trying to figure out what our brand would be. And I'm not going to make you guys do this because I'm not sure that there's time, but just wanted to provide you with this slide so that you guys could potentially think about this in your organizations. Think about prevention as a product in a store. What other products would you want it to be associated with? And what section of the store would it be in? Why? It seems pretty, pretty elementary to think about that, but it's also a really, we found it to be, we all laughed at the question, but we found it to be a very useful tool in trying to figure out where it belongs, where prevention belongs in the world. So whether it be with your community or in your organization, it's just an activity or just something to think about in terms of how you're getting the message out there and what it means for you all.
Sorry, I paused.
Good.
Okay, let's see. Okay, there we go. My controls keep disappearing. But. Okay, so Washington tools. So here are some specific things that we have. So there's a handout that we're going to send out that we'll actually just go through real quick. And again, I have to minimize this for some. There we go. Look at that. So this is a handout that you'll all get, and it just sort of recaps what we've talked about and then goes in, hopefully, to a little worksheet that you can do. So my hope for you all is that you can go back to your agencies and maybe you present this to your board or at a staff meeting or just in a peer group or in your supervision, and just figure out, where are you at in these stages and how can you all build capacity or sustain it. I know a lot of you are already doing some great stuff, so what does it take to actually sustain that? So this is just some of the things, and then here are some helpful questions to ask that are based on what Jonathan was talking about those aspirations and strategies, organizational skills, the structure, and the culture. So I think, this could be, a great thing for strategic planning purposes or for your next board meeting or your retreat. Just figure out, how you want to use it. So I hope that's helpful. Here's just more of a specific definition of those 4 strategies that we were talking about. So we think that those here at the Coalition, this is sort of how we've conceptualized prevention, and I hope that it's helpful for you. It certainly has helped me to kind of get a grip on what are the containers. I think that in some ways prevention just seems, I don't know if the word I would have used was confusing or impossible, but it just would be like, overwhelming, because there's just so much, right? And so this was helpful for me to sort of narrow it into more of these buckets or containers. We like to call them buckets. So in terms of addressing root causes of violence, that is obviously a lot of anti-oppression work. And then more specifically, it's really about, rigid gender roles and really unpacking that. So challenging narrow ideas about what it means to be a man or a woman. We know that if folks feel, contained by that man box, that there's more likely to be lots of problems associated with that. So if people really can be who they are, in general, people are just happier, number one, but then also there aren't consequences to go outside of that. And then a lot of times those consequences are really what breeds violence in relationships. There's also this idea of, financial stability or independence, right? That if people are able to make it work on their own, then they don't necessarily, I was talking to Jonathan, I just have this idea, like if we could just help everybody with their rents, they didn't have to move in with each other, you could just prevent so many bad relationships from getting worse, right? So that for me is, working on the Economic Justice Project for so long, I just saw that a lot, that if we could just help people not have to move in together or figure out ways where child support wasn't as big of an issue, it just would have really been helpful and beneficial for folks. And then just thinking again about that anti-oppression, the interconnections of all of these isms that really make people's lives so much more complicated and difficult. So that's, addressing root causes of violence, shifting culture, again, really creating that expectation that people will be able to have healthy relationships and creating an intolerance for abuse. That, I think, is something communities are trying to do in all sorts of ways. Building skills, this is that kind of innovative piece that we were talking about around really helping people to envision what does it look like to actually have conflict in ways where it's not abusive. That might be a revolutionary idea for some folks. So, how do you do that in your communities? Do you have relationship skills classes where it doesn't matter how, where you're at in your relationship, you can have just started or you're thinking about asking somebody out, or, you've been in a committed relationship for 20 years, but people can always improve. I certainly know that that is the truth for me. And then finally, just promoting healthy relationships, having conversations about what healthy relationships look and feel like. What is that, making that more real for folks. So in terms of how we've conceptualized that here at the Coalition, you'll see some examples down there that, again, you can just have your own buckets of what your work looks like. I also wanted to include kind of a worksheet for you. So this might just be helpful, again, in a staff meeting or in a small group to figure out what are you already doing and what would you like to be doing. And, if these four, I guess I can't think of any word besides buckets. If these four categories work for you, do it that way. Or if it's just, if you want to, the thing is, let's not pretend like they're all these disparate things, right? They totally go together. So if there are things that, that you're doing in one of those strategies that or speak to you, certainly you can write it down. And then what are the next steps that you want to do? And then finally, this was that, the 5 ways to increase your prevention's capacity. This is, just really some strategies that you can use that I think all of us can do. So what is the thing that's going to get your board on board? Maybe they already are. Maybe they're the ones that are out in front. But maybe they need a little bit of convincing. Maybe this is a big shift for your agency to think differently about its work. Again, spreading that message that domestic violence is preventable is, I think, just it's a huge gift to be able to actually really know that and believe that, that there's no reason why this has to occur. And, we could all have other jobs. I always think about that. I could be, I'm not a painter, but maybe I could be a painter. Maybe I could be. So, again, that idea of staying connected and networking with folks, trying it out, and then making that connection. So here I just have a little bit in the footnote of some specific ideas for you that show you kind of how prevention work is really linked to services to victims. So that is a handout you're all going to get, and then you also will get the copy of the presentation So get the presentation, this PDF, and then you'll also get the Virginia recipe card. So hopefully that will be helpful for you. So the other thing that you all have access to, hopefully if you're one of our programs here in Washington, is that you have access to In Their Shoes, Teens and Dating Violence. You have both the classroom edition and the one for adults. And really, like I said earlier, this is something that I think gets you ready to do prevention work. It's, you know, one of those things that's really engaging. People have a great time doing it. It's very impactful. People have a visceral reaction to going through it. It's not just sitting through a presentation about statistics. It's really experiencing what, you know, the ups and downs and what it's like for teens and relationships. And what I've found is that it works for adults, and it also really works for young people. That when we first did it, we were thinking we had to do something more techy and more exciting, you know, like an app or something. And when I piloted it with young people, they were like, oh no, this totally works for us. So the classroom edition is great because it can be done in 50 minutes. So if you do get access to schools, you can do it in one class period. And then there's some supplemental activities that you can do, because obviously we'd love for you to be able to get in more than once. There's also, you all have access to, hopefully, the How's Your Relationship cards. All of these are live links, so when you get the PDF, you'll be able to click on them. The How's Your Relationship cards are things that really help you have conversations with people at all developmental levels. So there's cards that are for ages 2 to 7. What did I have here? I'm looking at them right here. So 2 to 7, young kids, then older kids 7 to 10, tweens 10 to 14, older teens, and then adults and up. And there's games and stuff, and what we've found is that people, there's 5 questions, so it's really doable, it's easy, and then there's also some tips for how to do this. So these are, you know, you could do a community event where you give out a bunch of How's Your Relationship cards and then have conversations, and then maybe have an event a month later and say how to go, you know, and see what folks come up with. The other thing, just to, you know, you all are special since you're on this webinar, so you get to hear that we're doing this. It's not yet released, but there'll be a teaser blog post next month. But I'm working on a series called Love Like This that will be on our blog, canyouRelate.org, if you haven't checked that out yet. That will hopefully be something that you all can use that will really be about skill building, and will tackle issues that come up in relationships like jealousy or fighting or breaking up or even asking out, consent, those kinds of things, that will tackle it in ways that really make it clear, you know, what's the thing to do versus what's the thing not to do. So stay tuned for that. Certainly we here at the Coalition and our sisters over at WSCADV are also here for you. WSCADV has a ton of great resources that I've listed down below. They have, you know, really great, if you've never thought about prevention before, or you keep hearing us say social ecological model and you're like, what the heck is that? They have some great resources on that. So definitely click on that link for them. There's also national and statewide listservs. The WSCADV hosts one in-state, and then nationally there's the Prevent Connect listserv, which is really fantastic. There's tons of resources. So that's a link there too. And then of course at the WSCADV conference, which is coming up at the end of next month, they'll have lots of prevention workshops, and just in general, it's just a great place to go and connect. Anything that,
That's good.
Let's see. So we have a few more things after this, but we're getting really close to the end. Did anybody have any questions or comments? Doesn't have to just be questions. You want to give that raccoon a high five? How cute it is. So cute. It's just staring at us.
We did see in the chat box a few people answered the where would prevention be in the grocery store, like what aisle would it be on? Someone said right next to the toilet paper because everyone has to buy that.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
It's a good marketing strategy.
I like it.
Someone else said next to kimchi and probiotics.
Spicy and, trying to think like what?
Preventative,
yeah.
healthy.
Yeah, there you go.
Supplemental.
Spicy and healthy. I like that. Yeah. Let's see, are there any other ones that we missed?
And if you think of anything after this little question section, I mean, you guys have been asking, you've been good about asking your questions throughout the presentation, but yeah, if you think of anything after this, definitely email us or, you know, type it in the chat box if we're still doing that.
hopefully we've just been extremely clear.
Yeah, everyone gets it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that exercise around the grocery store would be an interesting one to do as a staff, you know, just to, as a brainstorm. I kind of want to do that with our folks here. So we'll just give you another minute to think. Here we go. It says, do you have curricula and handouts or any other resources for support groups in Spanish? Support groups. So I'm assuming you're talking about not prevention here. Let's see, I'm trying to think what we have here. My brain is like not focused on that. In our, I would have to look. Actually, you know what? Hold for a moment. Let me do a little looking. I know WSCADV has a support group manual, but whether or not it's in Spanish, I don't know off the top of my head. I'm just looking on our website while we're doing this. So we have on our website a section called Crossing Borders. So, you know, Rocio, I would suggest, and I actually have it here, so I would suggest looking through the Crossing Borders online. They have lots of resources that aren't just ours here at WSCADV, but are from all over the country, including from Casa Esperanza, which is the kind of national TA provider. So I would start there, and then I can get back to you and think about it. This is just not necessarily in my, I haven't just been thinking about this today, so I'm having trouble like thinking about it. So anyway, so this though is the place to look at for all sorts of information. It's kind of like a clearinghouse, and then I will think more about it and talk to those folks and see if I can get you some resources. Any other questions? Okay, I have a commercial coming up that I wanted to do. So, so if you have other questions, feel free to write them in. So we have coming up our third annual Refuse to Abuse 5K that I wanted to make sure you all knew about. It is actually a great prevention opportunity because here's the scoop. It's like 1,500 people who we normally don't get to talk to about this issue. So, you know, we all talk to each other. We're like, you know, we're all sick of hearing from each other. That's not true, but we all love each other. But, you know, we're the choir, right? We're the folks that we all have heard the message. We get it. You know, we're liking the posts and, you know, we're moving on and we're fighting the fight. But the folks that come to this are typically not our folks. And so they're people that hear this idea that healthy relationships are for everybody in a really different way. So it's really exciting. So if you want to be a part of it, which I hope that you do, you can come and you can run or walk. You can also volunteer. We need over 100 volunteers. It's a great opportunity if you have like a group of young people who you're working with. If you want to all do something, you could wear your shirts and come and promote your group, and then also have this great experience. You get to go on every level of Safe Go Field. You even get to be on the warning track. It's super fun. So come and do that. The other thing is that we do use this to fund our prevention work, and we also use it as our big prevention messaging opportunity. So we will be releasing the Love Like This blog there, and it is a chance to sort of just have different conversations with people. So last year, everybody who came got those How's Your Relationship cards, which is just exciting to think about that there's, you know, all these folks out in the world who have this tool that otherwise they probably wouldn't have ever gotten from us. So. The other thing is our annual conference is in September. It's September, I should have put the date, hello, September 15th through 17th. It's in Vancouver, Washington also. It's funny that me and WSCADV for some reason are both in Vancouver, but it'll be great. And our theme is Ready, Set, Go. So the last couple of years we've been talking about beloved community and using those Move to End Violence principles that we talked about. Now we're kind of ready. So this is a launching off point. One of our keynotes is going to be Heather Corinna, who does the Scarletine website. If you haven't checked that out, it's Scarletine. Actually, I'll write it in the chat for a second. But if you haven't checked that out, I really encourage you to. It is a great site. It's geared towards teens, but it's really great for everybody, honestly. If you go on there, believe me, you will learn something you did not know. You might not have wanted to know it, but you'll learn it. So that is a really great resource. So she's going to come and share about her work, and then she's also going to do a couple of workshops. And then we'll have some other prevention-y workshops. We have somebody coming and talking about their middle school and high school groups that they're doing. And it's just a great opportunity to come and network. So we hope to see you there. Is there anything that you need to promote? No? Okay. So again, we're wrapping up here unless you folks, or actually, hold on, I'm going to write, where is my chat? Look at that. Hold on, I'm going to write Scarletine. There's like one. Fill out your evaluation when it pops up. Pretty please. We really want to know. And then again, if you're all sitting around, hovered around the computer, the first question asks who else from your program attended. So that's a way to make sure that you all are getting credit for it. And then we wanted to make sure that we did a shout out to the Virginia Action Alliance. They have just done such great work on this, and I just so appreciate Jonathan coming and sharing their perspective. So I don't know if you want to say more about their great stuff.
They're just great.
You miss them.
Love them. Yeah, they're great. And there's a lot of compatibility between them and what I love about them and WSCADV and WSCAP and your coalitions in the state here. So yeah, you guys are set to do awesome work.
Great. And thank you very much, Jonathan. This was so much better than me doing it on my own. Certainly, we learned a lot from you. And I really hope that you all stay in touch. Again, here's my contact info. So again, when we end this webinar, you all will get the evaluation popped up, and then shortly you will get an email from us with the 3 materials that I talked to you about. So unless there is another question, I think we're going to call it a day. All right, y'all. Thank you. Bye.